Hello, welcome back to Blue Harvest Toys and day number 3 of our Star Wars celebration journey. It was Sunday. We got in straight away, which was quite surprising. We got through the security and we just kept walking and walking and walking. And we thought we've walked quite far here. And then found out that we were in the main corridor towards the rooms. So we sat down, I did a live stream. It was quite amazing how different it was from the first 2 days to the second 2 days. So we were sat there waiting for everything to open. But we were still queuing up to get into the... They had to open the shutters, so we're queuing to get into the rooms, which was ridiculous. But the good thing after the Saturday night where I got let down by... Not by Ashley, it wasn't her fault. I got let down and I had to go straight in and get her autograph on the Sunday morning. And good job, I got straight in. I was third in the queue. I was stood in the VIP lane, but I don't think it was really important. And we got to meet Ashley and she was so nice. She asked me my name, she asked me where I was from. We had a conversation for about, 5 minutes, which was amazing. Very nice lady. And I will remember that for a long time to come now. And the difference between getting her autograph and Ian McDiarmid's is night and day. Night and day. I've got a bit of a bad taste in my mouth with Ian McDiarmid's autograph, getting his, not getting any interaction with him. And the other end of the spectrum, where Ashley was so nice and asking me questions, it was just amazing. That's how you do it. So after that, I went straight upstairs to the Blue Harvest panel. Yes, the Blue Harvest panel. Paul was already in there, so we didn't. I didn't know where he was. He was in there, and I got there quite late because of getting the signing. But I did get in. So here we go with the Blue Harvest panel.
Colors in the titles: blue harvest and purple haze. And then we need red tails, but that's not a code name. Lots of colors. Howard Kazanjian, a former classmate of George Lucas's from the University of Southern California, senior with Lucas and director Richard Marquand, was the producer of More American Cathedral. He became Lucasfilm's lead production executive, working on Raiders of the Lost Ark and then Return of the Jedi. Part of the initial drive for secrecy came from Kazanjian, who was rather obsessive about keeping integrity on things.
So the idea for using a code name was initially to help Lucasfilm negotiate its leases with these different locations within the country. And during pre-production, you had people like associate producer Jim Bloom, coordinator Nikki Herman, producer Robert Watts, and Norman Reynolds, the production designer, who just passed away about a week ago, sadly. We've been honoring him in a few different ways across the show, thankfully, because he made huge contributions to the original Star Wars trilogy and to Raiders. They were all scouting around the American West because it's not in Rensselaer. We don't think it's been shared anywhere, but they had 2 other code names that they were planning to use before they came up with Blue Harvest. And there was actually one for each location. So in the north, for the Redwoods, it was going to be called Beast from the North. And then down south for Tatooine was going to be Beast from the South. And as Pete's going to explain here.
And this is the original memo from George Lucas sent to Kazanjian, head of PR and marketing for Sidious, Watts, and Bloom on May 18, 1981. Lucas explicitly says, "We are to use these as production titles as though they were separate films in production simultaneously with, but not in any way."
That was unexplainable, that was weird and vague. What in the world is that? But somewhere maybe in the spring and summer of '81, because during that period, Lucasfilm associate Susan Tremblay placed an order for about 500 Blue Harvest crew shirts at the end of September.
That's right. She ordered them from a company called Blum Incorporated in San Francisco, a location that's just blocks down the street from where Lucasfilm headquarters is today. Here's the document from our archive. Those were Hanes BPT cotton variety navy blue. These are the shirts that have become iconic. For years afterwards, fans did everything they could to find them, even making their own in some cases. Jedi Master VIP ticket holders and here at Celebration, you can get their very own recreation of the shirt.
I wonder if those are BPT.
Here's longtime ILM model maker Ira Keeler. Of course, there were also the iconic Blue Harvest caps. This is kind of a reproduction. This used to be 2007 for Celebration. It's the same design, which Tremblay ordered from the Thinking Cap company in Los Angeles the week before she ordered the shirts, 400 total. Thinking Cap had been a licensee for The Empire Strikes Back, producing a variety of novelty caps, including one memorable example sporting plush Yoda ears. Incredibly, the original samples of cap colors still exist in the archives with an order letter, which indicates 275 additional patches bearing the Blue Harvest title were also produced. Anyone know the cap color that they finally went with? One of those color swatches. Anyone? I saw it. No? It was gray. Here's Return of the Jedi director Richard Marquand sporting one of the desert on the desert set. Today, both of the caps and patches are highly coveted by collectors for their rarity and behind-the-scenes history. I just wanted to talk just a moment about these patches. These are from my collection. The top one there is an original crew patch that I got, I don't know, 5 years ago, and there was an eBay seller who had these up. And you know, lots of these that come up on eBay are not real. But fortunately, the seller had displayed the back side of it as well. And if you know patches, they're like a fingerprint on the back. If it's an original, you will be able to trace the jagged lines of the threads. So he had shown that this was an actual legitimate one, and he didn't know that they were worth anything, so I got it for a steal. Unfortunately, I sent the link for the other 3 to good friends instead of buying them myself. But at least I was able to finally acquire one and share the love with that. Oh yeah, and okay, the middle patch. We're going to talk in a bit about a fan club called Blue Harvest Gang. That was their custom patch that they made, and the bottom one came from a Japanese fan club back in 1983. So Blue Harvest Gang was definitely out in fandom, probably more so than the Lucasfilm company would have liked. But there you go.
We're reading fully into it now.
Yep.
Okay, let's zoom in on Yuma and the Tatooine shoes. So the sand dunes in Buttercup Valley, they're in the far southeastern corner of California, right near the international border with Mexico to the south, and then just to the east is the state line with Arizona. And just over from the sand dunes into Arizona is the town of Yuma, and that's where the production was centered, the hotels and the offices and everything while they were shooting there. Ironically, the sand dunes in the area are called the Imperial Sand Dunes because they're just south of the Imperial Valley in California. And there are no sand troopers required for this shoot, however. This is actually, I'm pretty sure this has never been published before. This is a new scan out of our image archive, which is really cool, thanks to our archives team. Yuma itself became the center of all the speculation that was going on in the press and in fandom about what this Blue Harvest thing might actually be. The local film commission in Arizona seemed perfectly comfortable letting everybody know that it was Lucasfilm coming in to shoot. Blue Harvest was billed as a Lucasfilm production, after all, just not a Star Wars production.
In spite of their commitment to secrecy, it's ironic that Lucasfilm chose a location that was heavily populated with dune buggy enthusiasts. The Junko feature observed at the time, Buttercup Valley is generally quiet during the week, but on weekends and holidays it becomes the dune buggy capital of the world. During Memorial Day weekend in 1981, it drew 22,000 buggy enthusiasts.
And this is an amazing photo where you see in perspective the barge from behind and then a whole line of buggies and ATVs right at the fence line. And so they started to get nervous that the noise was going to be a problem. So they're trying to shoot, the scene of Luke on the gangplank or whatever, and then you're hearing all the dune buggies going by, 20 yards away. But let's zoom out for a moment. Here is another probably new scan, I think, of one of the skips. Principal photography on Revenge of the Jedi started at L Street in January of '82, and they wouldn't come to California until April. It was actually about 41 years ago. This week is when they were starting to shoot in the desert. But already in 1981, because someone did in fact break a leg while making Blue Harvest, it was stuntman Paul Weston. He was one of the guys who went into the Sarlacc pit. I think he was a Weequay, all with his rubber mask on. And if you visit the nonprofit museum Rancho Obi-Wan in Northern California, they have Mr. Weston's original cast that was signed by many members of the cast. It's too early for content.
All right. Meanwhile, back in 1982, at the Lucasfilm offices in California, the inquiries kept pouring in. Unit publicist from Los Angeles had seen an article describing this horror movie called Blue Harvest, and actually wrote to the company offering his services if they needed any help. You see, he had a lot of experience working in horror films and thought this would be a good fit for him. So in this case, the ploy just might have worked. On January 26th, local newspaper The Yuma Sun reported that contrary to many sources that were suggesting the production was indeed Star Wars, Lucasfilm had just sent a statement explaining that they were actually in Yuma shooting Blue Harvest. Previous week, Sid Yanis and the Lucasfilm team issued a press release. Blue Harvest selects shooting sites. Key scenes set to film in Utah and Arizona. Lucasfilm, it's a Lucasfilm production. We'll be shooting in tandem with, but on opposite sides of the Atlantic from the company's other current project, Revenge of the Jedi. Produced by Jim Loom, directed by David Tomlin, largely unknown cast, unit supervisor Louis Friedman, and art director Jim Schopp, and scheduled for release in Halloween 1983. A draft likely from around the same time includes a note that contrary to previous reports, Yoda will not be involved in the Buttercup Valley.
So this is where we got all of our information from at the beginning of the account. So as John Philip Peacher, the author of the original making of book, pointed out, the Halloween 1983 release date in that press release was the one outright inexact that Lucasfilm shared. Because all the crew members were involved in both productions and things, so it's kind of interesting to see how clever they were trying to be. But it was issued really as a means to quell the discussion about Star Wars that was going on in the press. The Yuma Sun, in particular, was widely reporting that Star Wars was coming into town, and their reports were being picked up by bigger publications like the Hollywood Reporter. Even the New York Times ran a story. And here they are in February of '82 with a picture of the sail barge under construction and the headline, "Horror film?" question mark.
Yeah, right. Horror film.
Yeah, because the press release had come out a couple weeks before, and like, no. And also, just as a side note, yes, the staff from Arizona's Office of Motion Picture Development had plenty to say to the press. Well, this is a great quote from one of them. "My job is to get them to come here and spend money. I don't care about the title of the film." And also, just an interesting little note, a lot of the press were talking about other movies that had been made in the Yuma area. It's only about 4 hours east of Hollywood, and so going all the way back to the 20s, the silent era, the Paramount classic Bojas with Ronald Colman was shot there, as was Desert Fox from 1951, 7 Days in May from '63. The original Flight of the Phoenix was shot right in the same area in 1965 as well.
Around the same time this was all going on, in late January and February of '82, it was leaked that some blueprints for the sail barge had Revenge of the Jedi printed on them. Production associate Louis Friedman had all of the blueprints relabeled with Blue Harvest. He also told Lucasfilm that the sources of the leaks had been capped, trapped, and eliminated. What ultimately settled the matter was compromise. Sid Gass made a deal with the Yuma Sun. If the newspaper would hold off on publishing any more rumors released, Lucasfilm would give them access to the set and offer them a world-exclusive report after filming was completed. Lucasfilm was committed to shooting in Yuma, which was costing them as much as an eighth of the movie's total budget. If word spread and fans swarmed the set and the surrounding dunes, they wouldn't be able to finish the scene. The Yuma Sun agreed. No other reporters visited the set, and in May of '82, once the production was complete, they ran a multi-page Revenge of the Jedi insert as their world exclusive.
And there it is, you can see one of the first headlines. Inside story, born of mutual necessity. And the Yuma community was pretty cooperative in general, and they understood what Lucasfilm was trying to do, and also that Lucasfilm was coming in and spending about $2 million in their local economy. And locals were hired onto the crew as well, and that same insert in the paper covered a number of those locals, like Terry Cordell, who was a student and part-time bartender, who became an extra as one of Jabba's henchmen, and 20-year-old Darla McDaniel, she was a gymnast who was a stand-in for Carrie Fisher for a few days. One of my favorite little details in her write-up is she talks about getting to meet all of the principal actors, having lengthy conversations with them, except Harrison Ford, who just said, hi. And also there's this interesting shot about the local logistics, so there's all the, the gallons and gallons and gallons of water that they have to have on site. The Yuma Sun also did interviews with the starring cast, except Harrison Ford, so there's, we're setting a theme here, as well as George Lucas. He did a really lengthy interview with Dan Smith in the Yuma Sun, and here's George and Kazanjian in front of the Sarlacc. And he actually commented about the whole Blue Harvest cover. This is what George had to say. The whole reason for doing it under a phony name is to just not make it that important. It's very easy to draw a lot of people out here. We'd just rather not have it be an event. We really want to get on with our work and get the job done. Lucas was pretty happy with how things were going in Yuma in general, except for when the winds would come up and blow all the sand off the platform, and it would take hours and hours. Sometimes they'd lose a day having to get the sand all back up onto the Sarlacc pit. He did, though, in that same interview, he was even talking about making more Star Wars at that point, possibly 9 or even 12 films, but he was very adamant that he wouldn't do it until he found a new way of making Star Wars. And Star Wars, the Ford Lincoln Mercury dealership, which is on the back.
So production took place in Yuma over 2 weeks in April of '82. No full scripts of the movie were on location, only the barge sequence itself. Kazanjian would explain years later that only 3 complete copies of the script existed during production. One for him, one for Lucas, and one for Mark I. According to Rinsler's The Making of Return of the Jedi, Mark I and the others, to kill time during the long changes in setups, came up with an actual story for a movie called Blue Harvest that involved Carrie Fisher, dune buggies, werewolves, and a ghost. Even George Lucas joked he would write a short script and shoot it in just 2 days. According to Mark Hamill, Lucas had mentioned that years before, director Roger Corman could make a horror film in 2 days and that they should do the same thing. Fans did arrive, of course, although the dune buggy drivers proved to be very cooperative with the needs of the production. Reportedly, the Harrison Ford fans were especially excited to see him walk from trailer to trailer or towards the set. Fans tried to meet a number of the cast members at local bars and restaurants, and at one point, Carrie Fisher pretended to be an English woman who didn't know who Carrie Fisher was.
Most of these anecdotes are in the Peacher and the Rinsler books, and you can read them in much more detail. The Carrie Fisher one is especially hilarious. It goes on for a couple paragraphs. This is a wonderful photo of Norman Reynolds at the fence again, who we just lost a week ago with the no trespassing sign. And speaking of Peacher again, he was one of the many people to engage with the fans at the fence line. Here's Mark Hamill signing autographs. Peacher was really impressed with the network. They were all sharing phone calls and information around the world in some cases about what was going on. And also with the fact that the fans didn't just recognize the actors, but they recognized a lot of the Lucasfilm crew members as well, like Robert Watts. During one instance, people were cheering in the direction of Richard Marquand, and he kind of got out of the way because Boba Fett was right behind him. He thought they were cheering at Boba Fett, and they said, no, we want you, Marquand, we want you. And we'll come back to Yuma and the fans at the end of the presentation, but first let's take a little detour up to Northern California.
Before and during the shoot in Yuma, Lucasfilm staffers Mickey Herman and Gene Bloom were busy getting things ready for the indoor shoot, which would immediately follow production in the desert. The private land owned by the Miller Relland Redwood Company, the indoor location was much quieter and more controllable compared to Yuma. There were rumors and reports in the local press, but the populations around Crescent City and Smith River were much smaller and further away from big cities like San Diego and Los Angeles, which were close to Yuma. Susan Tremblay from Lucasfilm's PR team told the local paper, the Curry Postal Pilot, we're a low-key production company and try to draw as little attention to ourselves as possible during production.
But they still were using Blue Harvest, even up in Northern California. So here's a shot from pre-production with the lead creatives doing a location scout, or a recce, as they say here in the UK, which I think is a lot cooler. There's Norman Reynolds again on the right, Marquand just his right, and Robert Watts over to the side. And of course, they're all wearing the famous Blue Harvest rain jackets, or slippers as we call them in the US. It's very rainy and foggy a lot of the time in the redwood forest. In fact, that's how those 300-foot trees get most of their water, from the moisture in the air. It was private property, as Pete mentioned, owned by the Redwood Company. So there were nowhere close to the concerns they had in Yuma about fans getting close. It was a private road to get up there, nondescript mailbox out on the highway. As Peter noted in his book, the security checkpoint for the set consisted of, quote, a recycled San Francisco flower child complete with psychedelic camper van. Very, very Northern California.
Secrecy was still emphasized, however. The three principal actors were given code names of their own: Martin, Caroline, and Harry. I'm guessing you can probably figure out who it is.
And just one side note that's interesting, this comes up in the feature book again, but the term "May the 4th be with you," which is coming up in a few weeks, was going around the set in Crescent City, because they shot on May the 4th. This is the first time that we know of the phrase being used at Lucasfilm. The story was actually Randy Tong, he still works for the company. He's been here over 40 years at Skywalker Sound. He's a director of sound design, an amazing man. But back then he was working at Sprocket Systems, which is what Skywalker Sound was still called then. And he was the location sound recordist, capturing all of the scenes they were filming in the Redwoods. And on May the 4th, he looked at the call sheet, read the date, and put it together in his mind of what the pun could mean, and started telling everybody immediately on the set and getting, laughter or very dry expressions in return. But it's just an interesting little sidebar. It's not the first evidence that we have, though, of the phrase being used. Actually, one of the first was in 1979 right here in London, when Margaret Thatcher was coming in as Prime Minister on May 4th, 79. I think it was the Evening Standard, or one of the papers, they ran a full-page ad saying, "Congrats, Maggie, May the 4th be with you." And so that's one of the earliest instances we know of the phrase being used.
And actually, since there's a quick sidebar, if anybody has a copy of that ad, we would love it. Never found it, but we know it exists because it was referenced in the England press show back. Hundreds of cast and crew were involved in the Crescent City shoot. This included dozens of little people, of course, who performed as the Ewoks, one of them being 11-year-old Robert Davis. Production wrapped by mid-May, ahead of schedule. A wrap party was held at a local cultural center in Crescent City using the Blue Harvest name. This wasn't the last time it was officially used, however. Some final elements that include the actors were shot at Ione's facility in San Rafael, which is just north of San Francisco. These shots included the sailscape with Han and Luke, and elements from the speeder bike chase for the Luke and Leia. Blue Harvest was used on all the call sheets. On September 4th, 1982, Lucasfilm gave a Revenge of the Jedi presentation at the World Science Fiction Convention in Chicago. Here's a shot of the Revenge of the Jedi exhibit they had on display, including original props. Howard Kazanjian, Sid Yanis, and Head of Fan Relations Maureen Garrett were all present. And just as a quick point of pride, that Revenge of the Jedi sign on the wall, I got that in my collection. Kazanjian spoke. Kazanjian spoke first and actually began with a slide reading "Blue Harvest, a new dimension in terror." He borrowed Scarlett's panel straight from Kazanjian. He quickly changed over to Revenge of the Jedi and actually explained now that principal photography was fully completed, a Blue Harvest was only a cover.
And his presentation wasn't unlike ours. He walked the fans through the productions in Yuma and Crescent City, although hopefully ours are full of more inside scoops, so you're getting more bang for your buck here, hopefully. But one fun aside, because we have the notes from the panel, so there was a Q&A. We're not giving you any ideas here. Somebody asked Kazanjian, how do you defrost a Corellian? Because Han was published the year before, or a couple years before. And of course, the one that everybody probably knows, the Family Guy adaptations or parodies that were made with Lucasfilm's cooperation. Blue Harvest was the first one, ironically based on A New Hope, which was released in 2007. Perhaps if they'd known how successful this would have, that this was going to be, it would have saved Blue Harvest for the third one, because they ended up making all three. But these types of things really show how this code name has penetrated the popular culture and it's become, part of our common parlance of Star Wars fans.
Okay, to conclude, we'd like to circle back to the desert near Yuma, Arizona. Earlier, we discussed how many fans found their way to the sail barge location during filming. Well, some of them were captured on film by Lucasfilm's behind-the-scenes crew, and we're delighted to have a chance to share some of it with you here today. This group of mostly young adults came out of San Diego, about a 3-hour drive to the west. One of them, a man named Sue Da, had a friend who was dune buggying in the area and called her to report mysterious construction going on nearby. When she and her friends saw one of the newspaper reports with the name Blue Harvest and an image of a sail barge, they immediately decided it was time. So much for the code name.
And there were a couple write-ups in Bantha Tracks, the newsletter of the official Star Wars fan club. Anybody who got Bantha Tracks? Okay, cool. It's a wonderful resource if you dig up the original newsletters on eBay and the like. But this was the first one, where it's just kind of a brief overview and a picture of some of the members of the gang. And then after Jedi was released, they did a much more in-depth report about them. The man on the bottom holding up the kind of fake Oscar there, that's actually Sid Giannis, who was the head of PR and marketing at Lucasfilm for many, many years. He went on to become president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences after he worked for Lucasfilm. But Sue Da told the more detailed story of how they figured out Star Wars was being filmed in Yuma. A friend of hers went to the town and was talking around and actually confirmed that it was Star Wars with a local donut vendor people. So if the donut vendor knows what productions in town, I'm not sure how well it was working there. But groups of people from San Diego that were known as the Blue Harvest Gang made trips out to Yuma over those days. One funny detail is when they saw Mark Hamill come out of his trailer in his black Jedi costume, they didn't realize it was Mark Hamill at first, it was far away. So they looked and they said, it's the other, the one Yoda mentioned. After Empire, he was like, who's the other? And then he came closer and I said, oh, it's Luke. Oh, why is Luke wearing black? And then in another one of the things you'll see in this video, he explained that they got to meet Sid Giannis, they met Howard Kazanjian, Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, Billy D. Williams, Anthony Daniels, all came and spoke with them. Carrie Fisher told them that completing the trilogy was really sad, to be ending all these years of work, but she thought Jedi was going to be the best of them all. And to tee up the clip here, you'll see a handful of the members of the gang speaking with Sid Giannis and Howard Kazanjian. Giannis is off camera the entire time, but he's the one asking most of the questions. He's from Brooklyn, New York, and you can make that out in his accent. And then Kazanjian shows up a couple of times. You'll also see a surprise member of the cast makes an appearance to come by. And we've been able to confirm the names of the members of the gang who are in the clip. So they are Bretton Daw, Diane Starr, Shelley Chivello, Cindy Corman, David Glanzer, and Holly Carroll are the members. And David is actually, what does David do now?
I think he heads up the San Diego Comic-Con. He's kind of a big person in the media industry now. And you'll see him as a young man here. It's pretty interesting.
He's gone on to have quite the career. Yeah. And so, one other thing I wanted to mention, there's a wonderful little girl in this video too, but we sadly don't know who she is because she wasn't part of the gang. There were all kinds of other people there as well. So she just happened to be there and she has some great things to say. But enough setup. Let's check out this clip. We just want this next celebration, so if we can do our best with the honor system, please, and have no recording. Let's keep this in the room.
So straight after the panel, I went up and had a little word and gave him one of my cards and said, "Oh, I'm Blue Harvest as well." So hopefully, I won't have to change my name soon. These guys actually work at Lucasfilm, and I said, "You're not near the licensing department, are you? You're not going to report me." Hopefully they won't. But after that, we had a look around the shops again and just took in all the cosplay and things like that. I did go see Hasbro at 1 o'clock. I waited half an hour. They said we needed to reschedule, so I had to go back at 4:30 and do the interview, which happened, but it was kind of a lost afternoon, unfortunately. As I said before, I will discuss that interview on another video. We'll go through all the questions I asked and what they answered. So all in all, a really good day. I met Hasbro, I met Patrick and Chris. I did sell my yak face to Chris. We'll talk about that when I talk about the interview. And I met Ashley. So great day, great day. Join me next time for day number 4, where there's a lot more footage, there's a lot more of the shops, things we went around, and maybe a couple more panels. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. May the toys be with you.